In the winter of 1819, when the first hard frost clung to the window panes of Ashcombe Manor, Lady Eleanor Ashcombe moved with the calm efficiency of someone determined not to show the world how much she was unraveling. Snow lay in pale sheets across the fields her father once oversaw with pride, but now the land looked skeletal, as though even nature had begun withdrawing its loyalty. She stood at the narrow writing desk in the parlor, with a dying afternoon light cast long amber streaks across stacks of unopened letters sealed with red wax. Each bore the same remnants of formality: notices, warnings, and polite threats thinly veiled as administrative necessity. Her father's debts, extensive and poorly concealed, had ripened into a crisis for which the law had no mercy and even less patience. Eleanor inhaled softly, letting her gloved fingers trace the embossed crest of the most recent document. It declared in brisk legal phrasing that unless she secured a responsible male guardian or lawful husband to assume control of the estate by Christmas, the courts would intervene. Intervention, in this context, meant seizure. Seizure meant displacement. And displacement meant the fracturing of everything and everyone she loved, for her siblings were still too young to defend their own futures. The ink blurred for a moment as a quiet ache climbed behind her eyes, but she blinked it away. Time permitted no indulgence in despair. Behind her, the muffled laughter of her younger sister echoed faintly from the corridor. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile, one colored by both affection and dread. Neither her sister nor her brother understood the full gravity of what hung over them. They still believed she could save the household through sheer will, as she had so often before. She wished she possessed the same confidence. Instead, she felt as though the walls of her world were narrowing around her, each passing day tightening their grip. A knock interrupted the stillness, and Mrs. Hallowby, their closest neighbor, a woman whose fondness for gossip nearly matched her fondness for embroidery, stepped inside with the crisp scent of winter clinging to her cloak. Her expression tried for concern, but her eyes sparkled with the thrill of impending news. Eleanor had anticipated this visit. Misfortune traveled swiftly in rural England, often reaching neighboring estates before the afflicted party had fully processed it themselves. "My dear child," Mrs. Hallowby began, drawing her hands together as though preparing for a lamentation. "I came the moment I heard. Such dreadful matters, these legal entanglements. Without a husband to advocate for you, the courts can be so uncompromising." Eleanor maintained a gracious composure. "Your concern is kind, ma'am, but I assure you I am addressing it." Mrs. Hallowby's sigh was a masterpiece of theatrical sorrow. Of course. Still, one cannot help but feel for you. A young lady managing an estate, so much to shoulder alone. And at Christmas time, why, society forgets how fragile a woman's position is without a man's signature to uphold it. The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they were painfully accurate. Eleanor thanked her visitor politely and guided her toward the door, aware every statement had been designed to seep not only into her mind, but into the ears of every household within a 10-mile radius. She closed the door with deliberate gentleness once Mrs. Hallowby departed, leaning against it for a moment as silence reclaimed the hall. Desperation pressed in like a chill draft through a cracked window. The time had come to consider the one solution she had hoped never to entertain: marriage. Not for affection, nor companionship, nor the tender hopes young women often cherished. She sought legality, the cold, unromantic shield of a husband's name. But men did not enter unions out of goodwill. They entered them for alliances, for inheritance, for advantage. What could she possibly offer, burdened with debt and the threat of scandal? Her beauty, often remarked upon by ball gossip, had never struck her as a tool she wished to wield. Her intelligence, her competence, qualities she valued, were often viewed by suitors as curiosities rather than virtues. Yet there was one man whose rank carried enough authority to silence the courts, shield her siblings, and stabilize Ashcombe Manor. A man whose aloofness made him nearly unreachable. A man whose grief shadowed him like a second voice. The Duke of Ravenspire. Eleanor had met him only twice, each encounter leaving her with the distinct impression that he preferred the solitude of his thoughts to the company of others. Tall, broad-shouldered, and unfailingly composed, he carried the aura of one who had outlived some essential part of himself. His duchess had passed 2 years prior, though whispered speculation suggested complexities surrounding her death. Eleanor had never believed gossip. She knew too well how society shaped tragedy into entertainment, but she had seen the lingering sorrow in his eyes, a quiet sorrow that made his politeness feel almost fragile. He had withdrawn from society soon after, appearing only for parliamentary sessions where he advocated fiercely for agricultural reform. His name commanded immediate deference, yet his presence discouraged conversation. He was a widower, a political force, and the last man any rational woman would approach with a plea as humbling as hers. But rationality bowed before necessity, and necessity had driven her to the brink. The decision crystallized with painful clarity as she paced the study. She would travel to London. She would ask for a meeting. She would offer what little she had, loyalty, dignity, and a proposal of convenience that served them both. For the Duke, it might provide relief from the relentless matchmaking efforts of London's matrons. For her, it was salvation. She arranged her siblings' care, packed a modest trunk, and prepared to depart the following morning. When she stood at the threshold of her childhood home with snow drifting down in silent veils, a tremor of uncertainty threatened her resolve. But she took a breath, stepped into the waiting carriage, and did not look back. The journey to London stretched across a white landscape that seemed to blur past her window in unforgiving shades of gray. By the time she reached the Duke's townhouse, an imposing structure with dark stone walls and ivy clinging stubbornly to its edges, the sun had dipped below the horizon. Lanterns flickered along the front steps, their glow softening the sharp angles of the grand facade. Inside, she was led to the library, where the scent of ink and old parchment mingled with the faint warmth of a dying fire. The Duke stood near the hearth, his posture impeccably straight, his expression unreadable beneath the steady light of the candles. He greeted her politely, though surprise flickered in his eyes. "Lady Eleanor, your visit is unexpected." Eleanor gathered every shard of courage she possessed. "Your Grace, I come with a matter of urgency, and I must beg your forgiveness for the boldness of what I am about to propose." He gestured for her to continue, yet his eyes softened almost imperceptibly, perhaps recognizing the strain in her voice. She lifted her chin, maintaining a poise that belied the fear clutching at her ribs. "I require a husband before Christmas. Not for companionship, not for affection, for legality alone. If I fail, the courts will remove my siblings from my care and strip our estate from us entirely." The Duke's gaze deepened, the quiet stillness of his face shifting into something cautious, searching. "You ask for a marriage of convenience." "Yes," she whispered, "and I offer you nothing but honesty in return." Silence stretched between them, heavy yet strangely calm. He studied her with a depth that made her pulse quicken, not from fear, but from being truly seen. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, measured, and tinged with an emotion she could not name. "Very well, Lady Eleanor, I will consider your request." She bowed her head, gratitude flooding her. But before she could thank him, a distant knock startled them both. A servant entered with a message addressed to the Duke, who read it with a sudden tightening of his jaw. His expression darkened, briefly revealing the pain he usually concealed so well. Eleanor sensed the shift, a prelude to something she did not yet understand. But she remained silent, knowing she had already risked enough in one night. The Duke folded the letter with deliberate care, his voice barely above a murmur. "It appears, Lady Eleanor, that your proposal has arrived at a most complicated moment." The words carried weight that promised both possibility and danger. And yet, for the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt the faintest stir of hope. The winter ball at Carlton House rose before Eleanor like a glittering citadel, its towering windows awash in golden light, and its grand portico lined with footmen whose livery shimmered like frost in moonlight. The Duke's carriage halted with a soft jolt, and Eleanor felt her breath lodge sharply in her chest. Though she had spent the journey rehearsing composure, her courage now wavered beneath the weight of what awaited within: whispers, scrutiny, and the very society that had once dismissed her with patronizing smiles. Yet she stepped down with her hand in the Duke's, steadying herself not on his touch, but on the knowledge that tonight their union, however tentative, must withstand the public eye. Ravenspire regarded her with an expression both unreadable and unexpectedly attentive. His gaze swept her face, pausing just long enough to register the tension at the corner of her mouth. Without a word, he reached into his coat and produced a small brooch shaped like a winter rose wrought in silver, its craftsmanship delicate yet unmistakably strong. He pressed it gently into her palm before fastening it at her shoulder with careful precision. "Take this," he murmured, his voice low and even. "Armor is not always forged of metal. Sometimes it is a reminder of one's own resolve." The gesture startled her, quiet, intimate, wholly unanticipated. She had expected distance, perhaps even indifference. Instead, she found a peculiar warmth beneath his reserve, as though he offered what comfort he could without compromising the fortress he kept around his heart. She thanked him softly, uncertain if he heard her over the hum of approaching carriages and rustling gowns. Inside, the grand entrance hall unfurled in a blaze of candlelight. Crystal chandeliers spilled their radiance across marble floors polished to a mirror's gleam. A quartet played a stately air, its notes drifting upward like breath on cold air. Yet beneath the beauty lay a current of sharpened interest, eyes shifting subtly as guests registered the Duke of Ravenspire's arrival, with a young woman on his arm. Some stared in open curiosity, others exchanged glances tinged with speculation. Eleanor felt each lifted brow like a pinprick against her skin. Ravenspire leaned close enough for his breath to brush her ear. "Ignore them," he advised quietly. "They crave novelty more than truth." "Even novelty comes at a cost," she replied, attempting levity that fell short. His expression flickered, almost sympathetic. "Then let us give them nothing more than formality allows." But society never settled for what it was given. As they entered the ballroom, a hush rippled through the crowd, not from awe, but recognition. Eleanor sensed the shift instantly, the way whispers seemed to coil behind gloved hands as she passed. Rumors, she understood, had moved faster than she or the Duke. Her return to London, her sudden proximity to Ravenspire, the decline of Ashcombe Manor. Every detail had been gathered like crumbs and reassembled into an unkind narrative. A faint pressure touched her back as Ravenspire's hand hovered just above her gown, guiding without touching. The gesture steadied her more than his words had. Yet no measure of composure could prepare her for the appearance of the man who stepped forward as the crowd parted instinctively. Lord Ashbury, the very man who had shattered her heart a year ago, abandoning her under the guise of political ambition. He stopped short at the sight of her, the shock in his eyes so unguarded that the murmurs around them froze mid-breath. His wife stood beside him, beautiful, tense, her smile stretched thin as if held in place by pins. "Lady Eleanor," Ashbury said, his voice cracking with an emotion she refused to name. "I had not expected your return." Before Eleanor could summon a response, Ravenspire intervened with calm, surgical precision. "She was never yours to expect, Lord Ashbury." The statement landed with a weight that rippled through the ballroom. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. Not embarrassment, but the shock of being defended so unapologetically. Ashbury's wife narrowed her eyes, a flicker of jealousy sparking behind the facade. Ravenspire held his ground, posture elegant, expression cool, effectively cutting away the last tendrils of Ashbury's claim. Eleanor inclined her head in polite dismissal, then moved onward with the Duke. Their path left a wake of whispers behind them, but none dared approach again. As the evening progressed, the pressure of being watched softened only slightly. Eleanor found moments to breathe, moments where the orchestra swelled and candlelight shimmered across Ravenspire's dark attire, making him appear almost sculptural. Yet beneath his austere exterior, she caught signs of restraint, his gaze lingering on her expression after each encounter, his stance shifting subtly whenever gossip drifted too near. When the dancing began, he surprised her by offering his hand. "One waltz," he said, voice gentle but resolute. "It will do society good to see us stand united." She nodded, allowing her fingers to rest in his. The dance floor opened before them, gleaming like a lake of gold beneath the chandeliers. As the music began, he guided her with an ease that belied his reputation for stiffness. Their steps aligned, their silhouettes turning gracefully amid a sea of swirling colors. Though their bodies remained at a proper distance, the air between them warmed with every measured turn. "Your Grace," she murmured, "I fear tonight will only inflame more gossip." "Then let them speak until they are breathless," he replied. "Their words cannot undo our choice." "Our choice," she echoed, tasting the fragile truth of it. Yet there was little time to dwell, for as the dance ended, a young gentleman approached Ravenspire with a bow so exaggerated it suggested either overeager politeness or poorly concealed nerves. He delivered a folded note, his voice tremoring faintly. "For you, Your Grace." It was pressed in my hand by a gentleman who would not give his name. Ravenspire received it with a flicker of irritation. "Thank you." As the messenger retreated, Eleanor saw the Duke's jaw tighten the moment his eyes scanned the page. The parchment trembled once in his grip before he steadied it. Whatever it contained hollowed something in his gaze, dimming the light that had briefly softened his features. "Is it serious?" she asked quietly, aware of the countless eyes upon them. He folded the note with precise control. "It is a complication, but one I would prefer not to burden you with." She wished to argue, but the determination in his voice discouraged protest. Instead, she touched his arm, a gesture so slight she hoped it might escape notice. "We face this together now, do we not?" The faintest breath escaped him, almost like a laugh stripped of warmth. "You assume we face the same storm, Lady Eleanor, but I fear mine may yet swallow yours." Before she could respond, Ashbury's wife reappeared with the poise of a woman intending battle. Her voice sharpened as she declared loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "It is admirable, Eleanor, how you have returned despite so much unfinished history. One can only hope your intentions are as pure as they appear." A hush rippled once more. Eleanor's heart pounded, but before the sting of humiliation could fully bloom, Ravenspire stepped forward, his tone cool and lethal. "Madam," he said, "if you wish to question intentions, begin with your own. Lady Eleanor has conducted herself with dignity that far eclipses the barbs of this room." The challenge stunned even the boldest of onlookers. Ashbury's wife faltered, her composure cracking before she retreated with a stiff bow. Ravenspire offered Eleanor his arm again, and this time, when she accepted it, her grip steadied not from necessity but from gratitude. Yet the reprieve was short-lived. As they moved toward a quieter alcove, the Duke paused, his expression carved in indecision. He seemed on the verge of sharing something vital, something buried beneath layers of restraint. "Lady Eleanor," he began softly, "there are matters in my past that could complicate our agreement, matters not yet resolved." She raised her eyes to his, her voice barely a whisper. "Then tell me." But before he could answer, the orchestra began a new piece, and the crowd shifted, drawing them back toward the center of the room. The moment slipped from their grasp, fragile as winter breath on glass. Still, the question lingered between them, unspoken yet pulsing with promise and peril alike. And Eleanor understood, with sudden, unmistakable clarity, that whatever shadow haunted the Duke would soon intertwine with her fate, whether she was prepared for it or not. Evelina awoke the next morning with the sensation of having stepped from one life into another, although nothing in the room had changed except her awareness of how precarious her choices had become. The fire had died to a bed of embers, the frost still crept along the inside of the windows, and yet the world felt sharper, almost perilously so. She remembered every word of her confession to Nathaniel, as though they had been sewn directly into her pulse. There had been no going back after admitting the truth. The only question now was whether he would wield it as a weapon or a promise. She sat up slowly, drawing the bedcovers around her like armor, and fought a strange, growing dread that this morning would decide everything. When she reached the hall, she found the household unusually subdued. Servants moved with stiff shoulders and careful voices, and Evelina sensed at once that something in the atmosphere had altered. She followed the steps down to the breakfast room, where a footman bowed with a tight expression before opening the door. Nathaniel stood near the table, still in his shirt sleeves, as though he had been pacing before she arrived. The moment he saw her, he straightened with a controlled breath, and Evelina understood that he, too, had spent the night wrestling with her revelations. "You slept poorly," he said quietly, an observation rather than a question. "As did you," she murmured, searching his face for any sign of what he intended. But if Nathaniel had come to a resolution, he guarded it carefully. He gestured for her to sit, but instead of taking his place at the head of the table, he chose the chair beside hers. That small shift unsettled her more than any grand declaration could have. His presence seemed to press against every doubt she had tried to fold away. "I have thought much about what you told me," he began, pouring tea for her with deliberate steadiness. "About your fears, your uncle's cruelty, and the pregnancy you dare to hide because no one else allowed you a future." Evelina stared at her hands, afraid of what would follow. "But I have also thought about this child," he continued, "and about what it means that you trusted me. Trusted a man you barely know, more than your own kin." She lifted her gaze. "I trusted the man who pulled me from a winter road and spoke to me as though I were worth saving." A muscle in his jaw shifted, and something in his eyes, something she could not yet name, softened. Nathaniel rose abruptly. For a moment, she feared he had made his decision and was withdrawing from the entire arrangement. But instead he crossed to the sideboard, opened a drawer, and withdrew a sealed envelope. "This arrived by courier at dawn," he said. "It concerns you." Her breath caught. "From my uncle?" "No, an unsigned letter, but it was addressed to Cray Hall." She took the envelope with trembling fingers. The seal had already been broken. Nathaniel must have read it. She unfolded the single sheet inside and felt her heartbeat stutter at the elegant but unfamiliar handwriting. "I know what she carries. A union made in haste cannot hide it. If the Duke takes her, the scandal will not rest quietly. Watch the snow tonight. Shadows travel farther in winter." Evelina looked up, throat tight. "Who would send this? Who even knows I am here?" "That is what worries me," Nathaniel replied, returning to his seat with a grave expression. "The anonymity, the precision of the threat. It suggests someone who has been watching closely. Someone with interest in how we proceed." "You think they mean to expose me?" she whispered. "I think," Nathaniel said slowly, "that they intend to use you against me, or use your circumstances to wound us both." The implication landed like a stone. Evelina clutched the letter, unable to disguise the tremor running through her. It was not merely her reputation at stake now, but Nathaniel's as well. Their fates were no longer loosely entwined. They were bound, knotted by forces neither yet understood. Nathaniel leaned forward. "Evelina, you must tell me something plainly. Is there anyone at all, who might seek to ruin you or profit from it?" Her shame surged before her reason could catch it. She did not want to speak the truth, but concealment had already cost her too much. "Yes," she said softly, "the child's father. Not because he cares for me, but because he fears exposure. He is a married man. If his wife or his family discovered what happened between us, it would tarnish their standing. He would sooner destroy me than allow the scandal to touch him." Nathaniel's expression darkened, but not with disgust, rather with a deep, controlled anger she had never yet seen in him. It terrified her and comforted her all at once. "Give me his name," he said. She shook her head quickly. "You cannot confront him. He would deny everything, turn it against me. And if this letter is from someone aligned with him, I do not require his cooperation. Nathaniel interrupted quietly. Only the truth. Nathaniel, please, she insisted, gripping the edge of the table. If he feels cornered, he will strike swiftly. He holds far more influence than I do, more connections, more standing, more power to twist any narrative. Nathaniel did not argue, but the tension in his frame revealed how fiercely he disagreed. A knock at the door interrupted them. The butler entered with a cautious bow. Your Grace, there is a rider at the gate requesting immediate audience. Nathaniel's brows narrowed. Did he give a name? No, Your Grace. Only that the matter concerns Lady Evelina. Evelina felt the room tilt. Nathaniel caught her reaction instantly. You will remain here, he said firmly. I will speak with him alone. But Evelina rose at once. No, if it is who I fear, hiding will not prevent what he intends. Their eyes locked, tension crackling between them. At last, Nathaniel inclined his head, but there was nothing yielding in the motion. Very well, he said, offering his arm. But you stay behind me, and you do not speak unless I ask you to. She nodded, grateful and terrified in equal measure. They walked together to the front hall, where the great doors stood open to a swirl of cold air. A tall figure waited just beyond the threshold, his cloak dusted with snow. Evelina felt her stomach twist painfully as recognition struck her like a blow. Lord Pembroke. He stepped forward with a polished smile that did not reach his eyes. Your Grace, I thank you for receiving me without delay. Nathaniel did not return the smile. State your purpose. Pembroke cast a pointed look at Evelina, then offered a shallow, mocking bow. I have come for what is mine. Nathaniel's posture turned to stone. You have come, he said, to clarify a threat you made in writing. A fool's choice. Pembroke blinked, surprise flashing before he recovered his composure. I assure you, I have written nothing. Evelina clutched Nathaniel's sleeve unconsciously. The storm outside seemed to draw closer, as though listening. Nathaniel spoke with icy precision. You will not take her from this house. Pembroke's smile sharpened. She carries proof of our indiscretion, proof that would destroy everything I have built. I will not allow it to grow under your roof. You forfeited any claim the moment you abandoned her, Nathaniel replied. If you attempt to interfere again, the consequences will be far more severe than gossip. Pembroke's jaw tightened, finally cracking the veneer of civility. You think your title protects you? Then you underestimate the reach of desperate men. Nathaniel stepped forward, shielding Evelina fully. And you underestimate the strength of the woman you tried to ruin. Pembroke's gaze flicked between them, calculation tightening around his features like a vice. For a moment, he appeared ready to unleash another threat. Instead, with a hiss of breath, he turned sharply, mounted his horse, and rode off into the thickening snow. Only when the sound of hooves faded did Nathaniel look down at her. It seems, he said, voice low and threaded with something fierce, that your secret is no longer the only one in danger. And Evelina understood, with a clarity that left her trembling, that whatever lay ahead, scandal, retaliation, or something far darker, they were no longer simply partners in convenience. Their lives had crossed a point of no return, bound by truth, peril, and something far more powerful than either had intended.